The commitment to human culture and development that was so central to the work of Professor Fox is also central to our guest for today's lecture, Professor Patricia Greenfield. Professor Greenfield recently received the Uri Bronfenbrenner Award for Lifetime Contribution to Developmental Psychology in the Service of Science and Society, given by the Developmental Psychology Division of the American Psychological Association. Professor Greenfield received her PhD from Harvard University and is currently Distinguished Professor of Psychology at UCLA, where she's a member of the Developmental Psychology Group. She's a past recipient of the American Association for the Advancement of Science Award for Behavioral Sciences Research and has received teaching awards from UCLA and the American Psychological Association. In her academic work, Professor Greenfield explores how values, behaviors, and cognition are shaped by society. In Mexico, in South Korea, in Italy, in Myanmar, she has investigated cognitive development within changing social ecologies that include variables such as urbanization, education, and commercialization. She has examined the relationship on the individual level regarding intergenerational continuity of learning and innovation. Professor Greenfield also studies virtual worlds, seeking to understand the implications of this newest context for development and its implication for the social sphere. At the Center for Culture, Brain and Development in UCLA, Professor Greenfield has explored how culture and social relations inform brain development, how the brain organizes cultural and social development, and how development gives rise to a cultural brain. She asks how the brain makes it natural to acquire, use, and create culture, and how cognitive development builds on neurally mediated sociocultural practices. Professor Greenfield's commitment to the betterment of education in the field is reflected in her involvement with the Bridging Cultures Between Home and School Institute, which is dedicated to helping policymakers, administrators, teachers, and support staff design and implement programs that serve underprivileged cultural, linguistic, and racial groups in order to improve their educational outcomes and quality of life. Professor Greenfield has authored and edited over 30 books, and her list of journal publications covers over 20 pages. I thought of reading them to you, but soon realized it would be much, much more fitting to allow Professor Greenfield to start her presentation entitled Linking Social Change and Developmental Change, Shifting Pathways of Human Development now, and no, not after I finish reading the list. So let us welcome Professor Patricia Greenfield.
Thank you very much, Steve. It was a beautiful introduction. Greetings to the Fox family, faculty, students, and guests. It's a great honor to have been selected for the Seymour Fox Memorial Lecture of 2012. This evening I would like to present a theory along with some supporting data. A major goal of the theory is to explain how, as socio-cultural conditions change, developmental patterns of learning, cognitive development, and social development are transformed across generations. My research and theory are interdisciplinary, integrating psychology with anthropology and sociology. This is an outline of the presentation this evening. I'm going to start with the theory, which is relatively new, then present empirical evidence concerning the effects of long-term social change on learning environments, cognitive development, and social development. And then I'm going to end by discussing what happens when you reverse the dominant direction of social change, the effects of the current economic downturn in the United States and Europe. This is a multi-level causal model with socio-demographic characteristics of a community and individuals as the top level. Can people see? Yes. There's a direct route by which socio-demographic characteristics influence the learning environment. And there's an indirect route in which the relationship is mediated by cultural values. Adaptation is an important concept. Cultural values are seen as adapted to and therefore influenced by socio-demographic factors. A very important point is the idea that socio-demographic factors drive cultural values. Now I would like to flesh out the top level. So here I'm expanding on the socio-demographic level. I'm expanding it into the yellow box. In the 1800s, a German sociologist named Tönnies developed the concept of two ideal types of social environment: Gemeinschaft, which is usually translated as community, and Gesellschaft, usually translated as society. Gemeinschafts are what were traditionally studied by the discipline of anthropology. Gesellschafts are what have been traditionally studied by the discipline of sociology. Well, what is a Gemeinschaft community like? In terms of ecology, it's rural, small scale, simple, has simple technology, informal education, much of it at home. It's internally homogeneous, that is, there's only one ethnic group, and it's relatively self-contained, relatively isolated from the outside world. In terms of economy, the economy is based on subsistence activities, and therefore it's a poorer environment. In terms of social relations, most are lifelong with interdependent kin, and therefore irreplaceable. Well, that's the left side of the chart. Now the right side, what is a Gesellschaft society like? In terms of ecology, it's urban, large-scale, complex, has advanced technology, formal education, it's internally heterogeneous, multiple ethnic groups, and has regular contact with the outside world. In terms of economy, it's based on commerce, so money and the accumulation of goods are very central, and therefore Gesellschafts are wealthier. In terms of social relations, most are fleeting with independent strangers and are interchangeable. Think, for example, of a clerk in a store who you'll never see again, and it really doesn't matter who is the clerk. Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft are two ideal types. They're extremes. However, I think of these characteristics that are listed here on the chart, not as binary items, but as variables that can vary together or separately. So while the contrasting characteristics in the two ideal types look like a set of binary opposites, such as rural, urban, small scale, large scale, low tech, high tech, in the theory, these binary oppositions simply identify relevant dimensions that can in fact be quantified. That said, the ideal types are crucial to the theory because each item on the left side, on the Gemeinschaft side, moves children's learning environments and human development in a common direction, while each item on the right side also moves children's learning environments and human development in a common but opposite direction. This is the heart of the theory and will be clear as I proceed. But before leaving this slide, a special word about Gesellschaft. Part of being a complex society is being socially stratified by income and having ethnic enclaves. Part of social stratification is having smaller, more Gemeinschaft communities nested within larger, more Gesellschaft societies. These can be ethnically distinct communities, for example, and the relevance of this will become apparent later when I extend the theory to ethnic groups in Mexico and Israel. I begin to explicate the theory with the example of learning and cognitive development. In this slide here, I've expanded the socio-demographic level. In the next slide, I present an example that expands the graphic on the levels of learning environment and cognitive development. So this list of characteristics on the learning and cognitive development levels, that's the bottom two levels, is far from exhaustive. The variables selected are central, but they're also variables that I will utilize in my particular empirical examples. In terms of learning, we posit in the top left green rectangle, that one, that observation of a model, teaching by the older generation, guidance, help from an expert teacher, closeness between teacher and learner are characteristics of a child's learning environment that are well adapted to Gemeinschaft conditions. In contrast, on the right side, the Gesellschaft side, independent learning, being taught by your peer generation, trial and error learning, separation of teacher and learner, are well adopted, the theory posits, to Gesellschaft conditions. In the bottom green rectangles, you will see on the left that replicating the traditional is a characteristic of Gemeinschaft adapted cognitive development. That's the bottom left green rectangle, while constructing novelty is a characteristic of Gesellschaft adapted cognitive development, the bottom right green triangle, a rectangle. Although I have not emphasized the fact, so far the model is a model of human development under stable conditions of social ecology. Next, I utilize the theory to model what happens under conditions of social change. So, first you'll notice that all the change arrows, which are the horizontal arrows, go in a single direction, from left Gemeinschaft to right Gesellschaft. The arrows here show the overwhelming direction of change in our globalized world. While the red arrows show the overwhelming direction of change, I do not assume that change equals progress. As will become clear, the changes bring losses as well as gains, and this is extremely important to keep in mind. This may look like a unidirectional model of cultural evolution, but it is not. In this theory, change can theoretically go in both directions, and it sometimes does. So thus, I'm going to end the presentation by showing some ethnographic examples of the effects of change going in the opposite direction, specifically effects of the current economic downturn in the United States and Europe. But first, I return to the dominant direction of change around the world.